Welcome to my channel as I continue with the topic that I've had previously about working with a hearing impaired child or parenting a hearing impaired child. In the previous video, I talked about how it started, and I narrated the experience I went through since childbirth up to the age of 2, when I realized, or when my child was tested and I was told that she has lost her hearing and her speech. That was the beginning of a very difficult journey that it took me a long time for me to believe and to accept. And my life was no longer the same again. I remember when I went to Kenyatta for the first clinic, the first thing that was to be done was to take history. And the history that I was to give, I gave it for 3 consecutive hours. I didn't know it would entail so much. And as I was giving the history about my child, more was about me. And the questions that I was being asked, I was not able to respond at some point. Others made me cry. Other questions, I didn't have an answer. I remember the psychologist or the doctor who did my first interview, or who took my history, asked me questions like, when did this twin started to grow? When did this twin had their first tooth? When did this twin started to walk? All those questions, even if I had an answer vividly, I couldn't remember a thing. I had a problem with my memory, which is another story for another day. And therefore, this doctor or this psychologist doubted if I was the mother of this child. And this made me cry. It made me feel painful. It made me feel so bad, because it was like, how comes that you are the mother of this child and you cannot know any milestone of your child? And true to the word, I couldn't remember when those milestones were taking place. And because of the ideal situation, I went into a depression without knowing, because it was so real to me that this is just a movie. I thought it was something that was to clear within no time. And for the sake of those who are watching the first time, it is about my third borns, who became, or whom I gave birth as twins, 2 beautiful girls. And one of the twin suffered an infection that the doctors were calling sepsis, which I came to realize long after it was meningitis. And I tried to follow the doctor to inquire why they had to hide from me the cause of my child's loss of hearing. And Dr. told me that the situation that I was in, I couldn't, or I was not in a position to understand, or I was not in a position to cope with the kind of pain that I was going through. And therefore they decided to play it cool until when I would be ready for the news. And when I was told about the meningitis, I really felt hardly hit. I only heard that meningitis is a killer disease. I also heard that meningitis can cause loss of hearing, loss of sight, and all sorts of things. I never imagined that my daughter would be infected with that kind of a disease. Of course, there's no one who would want anything bad to happen to them. And I'm only narrating this story because it's now a story or my experience, because I am no longer hurting. And I'm also sharing to encourage a mother who is having a hearing impaired child or a child with a disability, to tell them that there is hope, to tell them that God is able to take away their pain, to tell them that God is able to give them peace. Because there are times I was without peace. Every day at night, I was not able to sleep well. I couldn't listen well. I couldn't think straight. Everything was a mess in my life. And I was wondering how God could punish me. And I remember one time asking God why he gave me those children instead of giving those who don't have kids. Of course, I had friends, relatives, and other people who don't have children. And for me, I already had two. And now expecting a third born, and instead of one child, I get two children, one who is hearing impaired or who got sick and suffered hearing loss. And now problems and challenges started in my life. And I could not understand why God was so unfair to me. And I went through so much psychological trauma. And it was a journey that I didn't know for how long it's going to be, or rather I didn't know how it will end. And it was so difficult for me to comprehend, for my family to comprehend, and I also did not understand. I was not even able to explain to anyone what was happening because I was in denial. I was not even able to comprehend a thing, and therefore I stayed in denial, and I stayed in a situation whereby I could not accept what was happening in my life or in my child's life. I would start by saying that having a child who has a deficit or who has impairment of any kind, it's a very difficult situation of parenting. One, it makes you feel inferior. It makes you feel you don't belong. It makes you feel cursed or even neglected of a kind. And to some extent, you feel that even the community or the people around you are secluding you, or they don't want you to participate, or they don't want you to, it's like they are putting you aside. It's like you are not normal because you have got a child with an impairment. And I went through trauma for about 3 years. I was a servant of God. Even then, I was a leader in the church with so much responsibility of various roles that I was praying. And with doubting God and with blaming God and with this pain, it was so difficult for me to serve. But at some point, I encouraged myself and I started going to church because I had not gone to church for some time. Of course, because of the illness of these children, they were sick, in and off, out of hospital, on and off. And this made me stay at home for long without going to church. And when I went back to church, it was like everybody is gazing at me, looking at me. That was after 2 years, and it is like, this child, the twin who didn't have an issue, was able to walk around, was able to pronounce a few words, while this other was not in a position. For me, because of the pain that was in my heart, I was thinking, or I was thinking that one day that my child will heal. And therefore, I never accepted that my child was deaf or my child had lost her hearing. And so when I went to church, she used to pronounce not really pronouncing, but she used to produce a voice, um, not making or not pronouncing any particular word, but a voice that looked or sounded noisy to the other people. And therefore there are many children, there are many parents and there are many friends who used to tell me, kwa nini unakaa na mtoto kwa kanisa akifanya makelele hivi? And it really used to affect me. This did not happen once or twice, to an extent that I was wondering whether I would continue going to church, because I couldn't have been able to answer or to explain what was happening with my child. And remember, it was not one child, they were twins. So I went through a very tough moment of nurturing twins, and one of them is sick, and I also had an issue myself. I had a condition that I was living with that was very sensitive, and I was using a lot of money. It was emotionally draining, and therefore I got so much depressed with this situation. I only thought my safe place was in the church, but I found the more that I was going, the more I was getting hurt, the more I was feeling like I don't belong, the more I was feeling people don't love me, people don't care, there's nobody who knows what I'm going through, and it really gave me a very, very hard time. However, life had to continue, and I continued with my challenges and with my problems, and my child continued to grow. At the age of 3, they had to go to school, to a kindergarten. And we had one kindergarten that was a very well standard kindergarten. And when I took them there, still in denial, I was expecting that things are going to change. So, of course, they were twins. I took them the way they were. And I only mentioned that she has a hearing problem, but I never mentioned that it was pronounced that she has lost her hearing and her speech. I was expecting that maybe after interacting with other children, she'll be able to speak, she'll be able to hear what they are talking about. And therefore, I was hopeful. So she stayed a whole year with the other twin in this private kindergarten. And of course, there were a few changes of improvement, but rather the speech never developed, and also the hearing was never there, because anytime I could go to the hospital, the same results I got from the beginning were the same. It was very discouraging indeed. And when now the year came for the twins to be promoted to the next class, I was advised that my child cannot be promoted because she has not been able to perform according to the standard or according to the kind of test that they were given. And when I went to the hospital, I was advised to take my child from that school, and I take her to a special school. This was the very moment that it really hit me hard. I never thought that I would, at any given time, separate my twins, one to be in a special school and another one into a normal school. That was a very, very difficult pill to swallow. And when I went to talk to the father, I gave him that feedback and he was not also satisfied. So we went back to the hospital, and the doctor explained to us that our child cannot learn into a normal school. And we were given, of course, deaf schools are not many, and we were given a list of them, and we were explained, or we were told that this is in Pokot, this is in Mombasa, this is in Nyeri, this is in Nairobi, such. And they also gave us the probability of where we can be able to get a school. And the probability that we were given, and remember that time she was only 4 years. The probability of a school was we were to get that school was in Ukambani, very, very, very interior. I remember the time that we were given a letter to go and look for a school in Ukambani. We traveled a very long distance, and after where we alighted, there were no vehicles going, and we had to walk for about an hour or so, and then we had to get into somewhere that we were carried by a motorbike to another long distance, places that are very interior. There are no people, there are no settlements, and it was the worst place that you'd never think about. So when we went there and we gave the information about our child, we were told that we can take the child for interview. And I was wondering, what kind of an interview for a child of 4 years? You know, I was full of anger, and there was nothing good that I was seeing out of it. But however, because it was the recommendation, we had to plan to take our child there. But after we went home and tried to think about it, discussed with the father, we came up with an idea that could be there is another school nearby, because it was a very far distance, and I was imagining now a 4 years old being far away from me, and that was not something that I could go for. And then we started consulting, we started asking, and somebody referred us to a school that was in Muranga, and we went there to survey and also to consult, and we were given an opportunity to go and take our child there. What was devastating is the environment I found those children in. I went home crying. After seeing the environment, after seeing the other children who were hearing impaired, and the kind of life that they were living, I really cried on my way home. And it was very difficult for us to part with our child, but we didn't have an option. We had to take her to school at that tender age of 4 years. You can imagine parting with a 4-year child into a boarding school, because in Thika, there was no deaf school. In Thika town or in Thika locality, we have physically handicapped school, that is Joy Town, and we also have Thika school for the blind, but we don't have any for the deaf. And we also have a special school for the special children, or for children with special needs. And therefore our child had to go to a boarding school, and it was another difficult life staying without that child. The other twin, when she was left home, we were left with her, she suffered the separation, and she really used to bother us. She really used to cry, asking for the other twin, and it was very difficult. Anytime we would go for visiting, or we would go for anything in the school, because we used to visit quite often, our daughter used to crawl and throw herself on the ground, which was full of rocks, and she could cry and cry and cry. And this devastated us. It really traumatized us. It made us feel like we have thrown away our child, and it was very, very, very painful. And I didn't know that I would cope with that. And I thank God that this far I have coped with it. That was in the year 2009, and since then it is now 12 years that our daughter has been in a deaf school, and she has been able to cope. She has been doing well, of course not without challenges. And I want to encourage a mother who is having a hearing impaired child at home that you need to take her to school. She need to learn, she need to interact with other people, and she need to know things, and she need also to relate with other children so that she can be able to continue with her normal life. So that is part of my story concerning my hearing impaired daughter, and I will continue with the rest of the experience in the next video. So keep watch, keep waiting, and I want to encourage every one of us that you subscribe this video, you watch, subscribe, and like, and God will bless you as we continue, so that we can encourage somebody out there who could be feeling the way I was feeling, and there is still hope at the end of the tunnel. May God bless you. May God do you good. Bye.